Trevor here again. I'm here with Dmitry Popov. We're getting to know each other. And so, where I started is how Dmitry got started with work. I noticed he sent me a Zoom link with a Harvard URL address. So, I asked him how he got started. So, Dmitry, go over that again and bring us back up to speed where we're at.
Absolutely. So work took its roots in this institute, which was part of Harvard University. And majority of time we were at the Harvard by Design lab. So it's a lab where we've specialized on biomechanics and understanding biomechanics of a human, really in different applications in physical therapy, in a factory, in the gym, and so on. And personally, being passionate about sports all my life, that's why I took the tech and we spun out work now 3 years ago from Harvard, and really we took a lot of iterations before it got here. At the beginning, it was really these device with motors and sensors, like tonal. Do you know tonal system?
I've seen Tonal before, and I have some athletes that I work and do some interactions with Tonal. That's cool.
So we built a mobile, a portable version of it where you can step on it, you can put it on the wall, put it on the bag, you work out it, and then we brought it to the field, and everyone told us, "Good job, but we have dumbbells, we have barbell, all the weights, you gotta quantify that." And so we've pivoted. We then built this system of sensors that you put on all over the equipment, but it was too complex, just too many moving pieces. No one knew where to put what. And then finally, our founder, Connor Walsh, he said, "What if you have existing wearables?" That's almost where I give up. I'm like, come on, there's an Apple Watch, there's Garmin. Like, should we be doing this, right?
Mhm.
And now we're doing this. No one else has done it yet. And we claim ourselves to be the first CrossFit wearable where you track all the functional training in the gym. The vision is definitely has become a reality, and we're continuing to improving it.
That's awesome. I love that. So going from paring it down piece by piece, right? You start with something that has quite a bit of hardware. You said something wearing on your back or your shoulders, to then trying to monitor something outside of the athlete, the dumbbells, the barbells, which
Right.
in that sense, something like an entire gym setup you have to have, and you walk into the
Exactly.
gym, and so that's quite something. And now here we're looking at you are getting into the wrist real estate game, right? That's what they call it when you talk about, like, I think other companies that wear wearables on your wrist or your finger or something that tracks it's HRV data or sleep data, but this is
Right.
much more specific to we'll call it the intra-workout statistics. I think a lot of other wearables tend to go into the how did you recover, how did you sleep, what are your steps like,
Right.
is now the wearable that is getting much more data and much more specific to the actual movements you're doing. One of the thoughts I had is where did you go about creating your movement list? Because that will lead me into my next question.
Great question. There are so many movements, and that keeps coming back to us every week, of course, when our users reach out and say, "Do you have the triple flip in the air?"
Backflips, of course, right?
Exactly. It feels like it's never enough, but really, where it started, it was specifically for CrossFit. We took a history of almost a year of workout of several of programs, and we just narrowed down to understand what are the most frequently repeated ones. And we look at the bar movements, we look at gymnastics, we look at the machines, conditionings, and built the first library was only 70 movement, and now it's 120, and we have another 50 in the pipeline,
Awesome.
including swimming. I don't know, I always see swimming because I think it's exciting that you can also track swimming with this now. Yeah.
I love that. I think that's awesome. And I'm very interested in the movement categories.
Yeah.
I have a good idea about machine learning and artificial intelligence. And what I know is that machine learning algorithms that maybe work uses to detect movements are really dependent on, they're only as good as the data, it's said in a lot of different fields. And my
Mhm.
question is, so did you create a situation in which you had one guy do 10,000 thrusters, or how did you go about collecting this movement data effectively to get these, we'll call them movement signatures? So when you put that work wrist strap on and the chest monitor, you know that it's a thruster and a wall ball per se.
Well, you clearly do have a good understanding of, as you say, machine learning. You're right. You're asking absolutely right questions. So we've started at the beginning with a very, I'd say, prescribed scenarios of what we want to collect given the library we have. And the fun part, over the period of time, we've learned that the less structured it is, the closer it is to a real scenario, and the more accurate the models will be. I think long story short is you will, no matter what is your structure, what is your approach, it will take months and years to collect the right amount of data. Because take even a simple exercise like squat. People do it with a certain speed, people can do it with a certain weight, people can do it with certain experience, certain height, certain body size. And a movement signature is going to look quite different from one to another. And so we did develop a custom, really long stack of models, including not just machine learning, but techniques and biomechanics help us determine which exercise it is. And it continues to improve. But to give you a perspective, today, the accuracy of tracking for majority of movement is 96%, and it continues to grow. This percent is somewhat has to be put in a context of data that we've collected and been collecting data for the past 2 years from thousands of athletes. We have 100,000 data sets and all are, which is crazy, human labeled. So we have people, experts who go in and lay every workout. If you own work and you do a workout, someone after you goes into that session and labels every set that you've done, not to detect, but to keep improving the models further. It's forever ongoing work. So yeah.
That's awesome. I think that right there is extremely compelling for athletes to get in there and say, not only is work giving me something, but I'm giving something back to work, right? That continuous improvement is something you look at in the gym. And as a brand, work has continuous improvement built into their own structure, right? The more movements you can track, the more data that you can collect from its users. And being part of that growth, I think, is a really cool part of work. Do you have a dream or a goal or a trajectory for work as far as what movements you talked about swimming? And I think CrossFit has a really core movement list, right? If you look at the idea of CrossFit inside the gym, there's only so many movements you can do inside of a gym when you're a normal gym goer. But when you look at something like the CrossFit Games or the
Mhm.
greater functional movement space as a
Yeah.
whole, do you have some sort of goal for work to be able to, obviously, you could say, I want every single movement tracked, but being able to start to grab at some of the movements that are maybe central, like a thruster, pull-up, box jump, but maybe some of the high rock space or some of the triathlon space, been getting into a little bit myself, there's the idea that you can really start to mix and match these things.
Well, work today already covers everything you've mentioned, which is we cover high rocks, we have sled push, wall balls. Only piece that we yet miss is the swimming because we just started collecting data, but not that far from it. And when I say swimming, it will be able to recognize things like strokes, 4 different types of strokes, and number of strokes and pacing, right? And all of the metrics we see most of the movements where there is most exercise where there's physical movement, it will be present here. In terms of the CrossFit movements, where right now we're a very challenging space where we're talking about movement like man maker, right? Where it's like a combination or complex of multiple different exercises all merged and blended together. And the more it's really becoming hard for the model because you have to make sure that sometimes this is just a squat, but sometimes this squat is a part of a bigger movement, and people want to see it precisely, and
Mm.
therefore, yeah, you question how deep you want to go. But the big thing I'm trying to often, and this could be, I mean, potential transition to questions you had. It's not just about can you recognize a movement, name it correctly. It's what do you measure about this movement? And can you really have to name it exactly? Or it's more about knowing that you've done X amount of physical work and these muscles were engaged and this is how much you were, or this was your pacing. So this is what we really probably should do more on the education side from work, where sure, rep counting is important, naming is important. Why are you tracking? Is really what the vision is like that more clear and comprehensive.
No, I like that. That's a great segue to something when we talk about power and movement. So, understanding power, it's really easy, I would say easy to track when you have a monitor on a screen and you're on a rower, a bike, a skier, or
Right.
something. You can look at your power, and then barbell becomes slightly easier because there you have that classic um, distance by time. I think that's the bar curve or something like that. But then we now have these movements in CrossFit where we have the dynamic gymnastics, we have box jumps, we have burpees, and these types of things. So now, how does work get involved with those overall measurements of power, and then what do we do with those?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we'll start with the basic, and basics is here to be able to measure the same units across different modalities, across different movements. And we start with movement. So there are two sensors, right? One is on a wrist and one is on the torso, as a chest strap. Both have an IMU sensor inside, which is internal measurement unit, it's called. So how fast am I moving it in space? It has gyros, which shows basically the orientation, and has a magnetometer, which it knows where the planet Earth is compared to the sensor. So we then take all of those and we merge those for one sensor, we merge it for the second sensor, we synchronize the data, and that gives us an idea of physically where in space your wrist sensor and where in space is your chest. Now, why is that important? Because when you lift weights like barbells, kettlebells, dumbbells, we will be looking at the wrist, and that's how we know the trajectory of the weight. Meaning, as you said, the distance, the displacement of that weight, the speed, and so on. And if you're doing some gymnastics like box jumps you mentioned, or pull-ups or muscle ups, we are looking at your chest and we're looking at the torso. So understanding what has moved, how it moved, to put some basic physics behind it. There are definitely some movements that do not fall into the physics categories, like toes to bar or walk and so on, where it's really hard to assess physical work. In that case, we use some biomechanical models, some coefficients to estimate the power to the closest possible. But now the question, why we measure power? Um, Power essentially is a very holistic metric that most professionals understand. Either that's fitness or sports, or either that physical therapy, because power is pretty much like if a lot of people understand the VO2 max concept, right? And it's really popular in cardio space because in cardio space, VO2 max represents essentially your fitness level, right? Where like your age, your gender, for your experience, what is the VO2 max level you can achieve? Same happens if you look at the power. Those are like brother and sister, where power will show your fitness level. And let's say if all athletes in the world will do the same workout and we look at your power production and you would want to compare for other of the same age, same experience as you will know right away where's your fitness level. Power represents your ability to do work, right?
Mhm.
If you are stronger, the power is higher. If your stamina is better, you will rest less and your power is higher. If you have a good form, your weight travels all the way and the power is higher. So any deficiency you have will be caught by this measurement. Um, it's last thing I'm going to say, the simplest way to compare it is when you buy a car, your engine of that car, it's exactly the same thing. We measure what is the wattage of your engine. And
I think it's now why work and CrossFit go so well hand in hand because as soon as you talk about measuring metrics, as soon as you talk about having observable, measurable, repeatable ideas in fitness, you can look at it at two ends of the spectrum. You can dive really deep into the power you create with a thruster over time because you talk about the speed of the barbell, you talk about the weight you're moving, and those types of things. But we can move it even further outside of it and look at your ability to create power across multiple different workouts over time. Say I've been using a work for 1 week and 1 month and 1 year, rather than just seeing our workout times change, we can begin to see how our power output changes. And when, as you said, when it comes down to it, it really just that is fitness, right? In a vacuum, yet globally, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And back to the, CrossFit power curve, right? The famous power curve. Um, Ideally, you measure every workout you have. I bet if we plot that curve for you, and we can, and that's what we should do, you see exactly where your power curve is over the period of 6 months in terms of the workouts you've done of different length, different modalities, and so on. So you understand exactly where your power curve and how it's shifting over time. Um,
Question that was very curious to me. We talk about movement signatures and just the gross ability to detect
oh yeah.
a thruster, burpees, pull-ups, and things like that. Does Work's ability lie to track something like a rep versus a no rep? Because I think that is in the competitive CrossFit space, it is
Yeah.
a very heated topic. And maybe even the high rock space. We see people who go from high rocks, from CrossFit to high rocks, and
Yeah.
high rocks seems to have a few movements that have some call it judging discrepancies when you're in there. I'm thinking burpee broad jumps, maybe lunges, maybe wall balls.
Yeah.
So if is now becoming the king of mass participation, 6,000, 10,000 athletes in a weekend. Where does Work's ability to detect obviously power and movements, but movement efficiency, which comes into the ability to perform the exact prescribed work to the exact standards, maybe not more and maybe not less. So where do those movement patterns lie in the ability to maybe detect reps or no reps?
Right. Well, I think, yeah, reps may be the easiest topic to cover.
Mhm.
The many reasons, right, for no rep, either that is the form or it's purely range of motion. I guess range of motion is probably the most common. Um, Exactly, we do measure today. So what we have is the concept of baseline, and the first done it's in a very simple way. The first time you do an exercise, and I will detect done a thruster before, and we're looking at your first set, and let's look at those 10 reps and what's an average between those 10 reps. And we'll assume that the first set was when you were in a good shape still, not gassed. And so we'll say, okay, that's your baseline of your range of motion. Now, if that's not true, you can always go in and choose any other set and save that as your baseline. And everything you're gonna do moving forward is gonna be compared to that. So if you're fatigued and you use your range of motion, or if forward wanna have an ORAP, you will see it because it's gonna drop. Now, we yet did not introduce a check of rep, no rep in the app, and that is for the reason that a lot of users might disagree for one way or
Yeah.
another. Saying, and you imagine, right, at the competition, that it can get very heated situation, can be a very heated situation. So am done technically. This is really more a decision. Do we really want to do it for events? I think we can and should implement, and there is an ability to do that. Curious from your perspective, maybe, would you say 80% of your range of motion is no wrap, 70? Like, where do you draw a line that this is a no wrap? Is there official regulation for that?
So, as far as no reps are concerned, they're pretty well defined movement standards. When we talk about something like a squat,
Right.
your hip crease has to pass below the top of the knee in a squat. So, this
Oh,
is
I
my
see.
femur and this is my knee angle. This is at parallel. That would be considered a no rep. Above parallel, no rep. As soon as that hip passes below the knee, that's the bottom of the rep. And then we stand back tall and we lock out our hips and knees in order to show a full range of motion. And so, I really like the idea of the baseline and then the deviation from the baseline. And I
Hmm.
think that it's what's commonly done in a human interaction when you go to a CrossFit competition. A lot of the smaller level competitions, you'll walk on the floor, you'll shake your judge's hand.
Yeah.
They say, can you show me a few reps? Or maybe if you're in question, you're maybe new to it, you do a thruster or two, and the judge watches you, and you're like, okay, those would be good reps. So you've now given the judge
Hmm.
your baseline
Oh,
so
I
they
see.
can see what you're capable of. Of course, there's some gaming when it comes to that and down
Right.
the line,
Yeah.
but there is a very defined range of motion there. And I think um, if this is ever something you've thought about, but the ability for work to be just like a timing chip you would get in a marathon or something like that. Everyone at a CrossFit event or a High Rocks event gets a work strap sign in, they perform a couple exercises of every movement they're going to be doing,
Mm,
maybe in the High Rocks event so people can see it. And then you have the ability not only to see the movements done because we can already detect that you're doing them,
right.
but
Yeah.
the deviation from the baseline.
I love that. That's a really good idea. Giving a small mini WOD like reps of each movement to really have a ground truth, so there's no kind of way to cheat that system, right? And probably it should be done. I'm not sure if athletes will agree with us, but I think ones that do it well will, so they can eliminate the competition and for it to be fair, right? At the end of the day, it's just to have fun and be fair.
Yeah.
So definitely could help. Um, the other piece you've mentioned earlier was about we see if you've done the amount prescribed, sort of, right?
Yeah.
Definitely you. We have a concept in the app called programs where you create your own program with friends, or maybe your gym has a program which you can put in there. And because it already has the text of what it's going to be, like you normally write on the whiteboard, we would know what to expect, right? Sets, rounds, reps, and weight. And so therefore we could even show you by work volume amount what was prescribed and how much you've done. We did not implement that, but I think it's a very interesting functionality road.
Well, I will dive into that a little bit more. So you're thinking about programs. So say I go to a CrossFit gym, a box, whatever you want to
Yeah,
call it. The workout of the day is on the board. And workout frame 21, 15, 9, thrusters and pull-ups. You can say that, okay, that is the workout I am doing versus just having the and then work detect, but we can work in reverse,
correct.
work. You can work in reverse as
Yeah.
well and say, hey, this is what I'm doing to get a better integration, we'll call
We use programs, as you mentioned, the reverse way is if many people are doing it and you want to be compared to other people.
it.
So people track their performance for different reasons. Some people are very much scared about how I did it, and some people do it purely for competition's sake, right? They just want to make sure they go faster, whatever it is, even like range of motion, taller and you have a bigger range of motion, congrats. But that makes you feel good. And so that's why we did programs. When multiple people do the same workout, we show you second by second where did you gain, where you lost seconds to other people from station to station. And not just that, we can show you how much you rested compared to them. We can show you, say, for what was the speed of your bar compared to other athletes who did the same weight. And so what that you can essentially infer from that is, am I stronger in thrusters because I can carry this bar much faster than other athletes can? Your body will never on purpose move slower, and your body cannot move faster than your strength allows you to. So that's a very easy way to understand your strength level, that exercise compared to other people. So yeah, that's kind of a very long way to say why we have programs.
No, coming from a bigger athlete, I know it might not show on camera, but I'm 6'2", 220, 230. So for me to get the same score on, we'll call it an exercise like 100 burpees for time, a very
Mhm.
classic CrossFit benchmark.
Right.
And then some other person, 5'5", 160, 170 pounds. If we both get 5 minutes on the workout, very fast, maybe 6 minutes these days, 7 minutes, whatever
Right.
my time would be. Um, is different. So in CrossFit and something like CrossFit or running or something like that, you can beat someone or tie someone or lose to someone and be doing more or less work than that person because of
The
the
height.
prescription and how you do it and height and the power output.
That's funny you're saying it because the topic of discussion for I'm curious what would you vote for. So we compare. So of course we have leaderboard, right? And classic way, as you say, to compare people just by say if you do AMRAPs, right? Who did just more sets and reps. Um, then it becomes unfair, right? Let's say if a smaller person can do more reps faster because they just have to travel less than a taller person, and therefore they would be on the top of the leaderboard. But then if you look at the amount of physical work you've done within the time, a taller person might have done more, and so produce bigger power. And so what we are doing is on our power, excuse me, power page, we compare you to other people power by pound, right? So how much power you produce by a pound of your muscle of your mass. And the piece here is if you normalize this by weight, then smaller people will always sort of win because literally we have these tiny ladies who just kick everyone asses on that score all the time. But then if you don't normalize this weight, then bigger guys and girls will win because they just have a bigger body mass. And with every push up, with every squat, they do more work because they just carry bigger weight. And so we still are trying to decide what's the fair comparison. I'm curious what if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so two concepts to my mind. The first is I don't know if you've done much in the idea of weightlifting, but there's this concept called Sinclair total.
Okay.
So it is a way that someone who lifts in the super category, or I think it's 110 kilos plus right now, so 242 pounds. You're probably aware of kilos better than I
Yeah.
am, but um, 240 plus the super heavyweights, those bars bend all over the place crazy. And then you have the lighter weight athletes, and how do you compare those two athletes? And there is a calculation, the math
Mhm.
escapes me exactly, but it's funny you say that. One of the highest Sinclair totals ever is his name is Sulimangalu, the Pocket Hercules. If you've probably ever watched like YouTube people lifting, one of the shorter athletes to ever lift. He was in a lighter weight category, but he has the highest Sinclair total.
I see.
And we look to the opposite side of that, and you look at something like cycling, and you have watts. Because I've been getting into cycling a little bit more, larger athletes will just be able to produce more watts. So
High
you'll
leverage.
say,
Yeah, yeah.
average the amount of power you can put into a pedal. So me and you are riding the same course at the same speed, but I have to do 300 watts in order to a smaller athlete 250 watts. But then you start to talk about wind resistance and forces and things like that. But I think it seems to be we need to find a way to marry those two
Yeah.
and way to track them evenly, because sure, more mass can create more force. You have more muscle,
Yeah.
better levers in certain aspects. I think tracking those over time, I would love a leaderboard. What you're talking about is this something that's already part of
Yeah,
work, a
it's
leaderboard?
correct. It is. Yeah, yeah. Dancing will give smaller people an ability to compete by reps and bigger people to compete by power. So everyone is happy.
Yeah. I think that's a cool way, just like you would have a leaderboard in a competition and you would have the overall winner, right? They are the winner who got the fastest time or who accumulated, in some CrossFit sense, the most points or the least amount of points, depending on how you score. But you have your overall winner. But then you can filter by certain workouts, right? On where
True.
event one, this person got 10th. But if you can do that in each workout, you say, okay, well, I workout of the day because it was rowing and thrusters, right? Big
Mm.
guy dream, or rowing and wall balls,
Mm.
right? You look at, and you can also look at the power produced during that workout.
That's
And
right.
so each workout result would have maybe power or whatever metric you want to put along with that. And so you can begin to not only track your workout, you don't have to retest rowing and wall balls in order to understand or the exact workout, but you can retest something along those lines and say, hey, I was able to average a higher power with this movement combination.
That makes sense. I like this idea. I do. There's a lot of exciting can do
Hmm.
ways at a bigger scale. And the next big thing that I'm personally excited about is to bring work to an event and essentially deeply integrate it into an event and track every person at an event. And maybe not even necessarily have a right away value for it, but after the event, take a time, look at all the data we got, and see are there other ways to evaluate athletes and are there other ways to compete to perhaps make it more fair or anything else. So that'll be something I really would love to do. Definitely looking for partners out there if you're listening. So yeah.
Dimitri, I think having every athlete on the floor be strapped up, whether it's streaming metrics, power output on the screen next to each
Yep.
athlete's name. We can even talk about heart rate and the way your power is interacting with heart rate. Is someone able to do that? I was just watching a race recently and they just popped up on the screen and you saw the top 10 athletes' current heart rate. And maybe it could be a percentage of their max heart rate. What zone are
Exactly.
they operating in?
Yeah.
And you can use that in the same way. I'm excited too. I think this is a really cool, you have so many good applications. And I
Yeah.
think those are going to be seen here very soon.
Thank you, Trevor. We gotta work on it. So yeah.